name is Krisda Chaemsaithong. I'm from the English department. And today I'll be doing the analytical writing and also the reading comprehension section. Okay, so let me turn on the slides here. Okay, so we'll begin with the analytical writing section first. Okay, so for the analytical writing section, generally you will have two parts, okay, in this writing section. And the two parts consist of the issue essay, and you'll have about 30 minutes or so for that part, okay? And the next part is the argument essay, right? And then you'll have the 30 minutes again, okay? And you'll have 1 minute break in between, okay? All this is done on a computer as well, okay? And for this part, the GRE will give you just one holistic score for both parts. Okay, the issue essay and the argument essay, they will be on average, okay, and you'll get only one score, ranging from 1 to 6, okay, and two people will score your essay, okay, and if they differ by one score, the third person will be assigned to score your essay, okay, so that's good. And the holistic scores will range from 0 to 6, okay, and nobody will get a 0 if you write something, of course, right? And write something on the topic, of course. But you should aim for 3 to 6, okay? Anything below, actually 4 to 6. Anything below 4 will kind of give a bad impression on your application. So at least you should get a 4. Okay, and at best you should get a 6. Okay, and then today I will give you some strategies to get 5 or 6. Okay, and you can see the rubric in the Kaplan book on page 322 to 323. Okay, but I reproduced that here for your convenience. Okay, and you can see that from 6 to 4 here. Okay. The differences lie in the quality of the argument, okay? For a score of 6, you need to give an insightfully presentation and convincingly support for the argument, okay? And for 5, you have to present a well-chosen example and strong support of your opinion, okay? But for 4, it adequately presents and supports an opinion. Okay, so you can see that the differences lie in the quality, okay, and also the quantity of the errors you make as well, okay? And the errors you make could be the spelling errors or could be grammatical errors, okay? And the Kaplan book has a review on grammar and mechanics, and that's going to be on page 238 to page 266, okay? But we won't go over that today. Okay, but I'll pay attention to how you can structure your argument and how you can detect the logical flaws. Okay, so let's talk about the issue essay first. Okay, and then we'll move on to the argument essay later on. Okay, for the issue essay, okay, you are given a brief quotation of an issue of general interest, okay, and you have to discuss it, making use of your own educational and personal background, okay, and you will have to give supporting evidence in forms of examples, okay. Maybe it could be current or historical events, maybe it could be things that you have read before, or any hypothetical situations, okay, but you need examples that serve as the evidence for your argument, okay? And this part requires you to construct your own argument through a thesis, or I would call it a claim, and evidence, okay, in support of your position on a given issue, okay? So you need to have an explicit thesis statement, okay, and evidence that supports the thesis, okay? And you can find topic pools on the GRE website, gre.org. Okay, they'll give you about 200 topics or so for you to practice. Okay, so the tips that I can give you for this particular section is that first you must take a position, okay? In an issue essay, you must take a position, okay? And 3 positions are available for you to take. The first one is you agree totally with the view presented, okay? The second one is you disagree totally with the view presented to you. And the third one, you can qualify the issue, okay? And I call it a partial agreement or disagreement, okay? And it depends. I would call that it depends stance, okay? And which position you choose depends on your preference, okay? And your ability to persuade the readers, okay? If you think that you can write more on, let's say that you agree totally with the issue, then you should go for that position, okay? If you don't think that you can agree with the issue totally, you must select to qualify the issue, okay? And there is no right or wrong answer for this particular section, okay? But what matters is an explicit statement of thesis, okay? And your evidence to support the thesis, okay? And your score depends on how well you support your position, okay? So let me give you an example, okay? So let's say that this is the topic for this section, okay? Which you can see on the slide here, okay? Plagiarism is a big problem in the world of academic, and usually technology is responsible for it. So students should not be allowed to use technology at all, okay? So when you're given this issue, okay, the keyword here is at all, right? And the proposal is students should not be allowed to use technology, okay? So depending on your preference, you can agree totally with that conclusion or that proposal, or you can disagree with it, or you can qualify it, okay? And just personally, okay, I would qualify the issue. I could say that in a lot of cases, technology is very useful in classrooms, okay? And in a few cases, okay, technology should be banned because it could lead to plagiarism, for example, during the exam, okay? So I could do that, right? So that's one example. For those of you who want to agree totally with the issue, okay, what you need to do is that you need to show that technology is harmful and technology will lead to plagiarism, okay? And the disadvantages of using technology would be kind of too much to bear, okay? And I'm not sure that I could support that position because I could always find exceptions. That's why I would rather go with the qualifying the issue position, okay? So, but there's no right or wrong. It depends on how you support your point of view, okay? So for the steps to take in this section, okay, I have about 5 steps for you to take, okay? And I have also the time limits here as well, okay? So within 30 minutes, you could do a lot, okay? The first step that I would like you to do is when you're given a topic, you should try to understand the topic, okay? What is it that that topic is proposing to you, okay? So you should spend about 1 to 2 minutes there. Okay, then you should select a position, choose a position, right? And remember 3 positions are available: agree, disagree, or case by case, right? Or you can qualify the issue. So for, against, or in between. So 2 minutes there for you to make the decision. And then just gather the points by means of a mind map. I'll show you how to do a mind map in a minute here. And, or you can use the outline to help you to organize your ideas. And then add details and examples to the mind map as you type, okay? And you should spend probably about 17 minutes there. And then finally, reread what you typed and then revise and edit the essay. You should spend about 5 minutes there. So totally it would be 30 minutes, okay? So you have ample time to finish this, sufficient time to finish this, okay? So let's see how I implement these steps when I'm given a topic to write about, okay? So let's suppose that we get this topic, okay? And the topic is public service activities should be required of all college students if we hope them to receive a balanced education, okay? So this is the issue, okay? And the proposal is that all college students should be required to do public service activities because that's good for the education that they get, right? So you understand the topic now, right? So you will have, next step is for you to take a position, whether you want to agree totally, disagree totally, or qualify the issue, right? Personally, I like to qualify the issue because it allows me to show that I think about the issue kind of in a more rounded manner, okay? To think about the issue more comprehensively. So I will qualify this issue, okay? So I will say that while public activities are useful for students, okay, in some cases, it might not be a good idea to require that for all students, okay? So I will take that position, okay? So the next position is I could gather points by a mind map or an outline, okay? So let me show you how to do a mind map here, okay? So basically you use kind of a diagram, okay? So I will first start with the summary of the issue, okay? So the summary of the issue is public service activities for all students, okay? So let's start with that, right? And then I have already taken a position, right? So I said that I will qualify the issue. I will partially agree with it and I will partially disagree with it, okay? So some reasons as to why I don't think that that's a good idea include, for example, too many activities can lead to unbalanced education, right? Because the purpose of this is for students to have a balanced education, right? But too many activities required of them might lead to the negative side of that, right? So that's one point, okay? The second point is it could be too much for students who already have work to do, okay? Who already work or who have other responsibilities, okay? Some of the students are already social workers, okay? So they already do public service activities, right? So for these students, it might be too much for them, okay? And they might have families to take care of and so on. So it could be in this category as well, okay? Third one, you could say that public service activities should be a choice rather than a requirement, right? Because altruism, doing good things for the public, should not be forced, okay? Shouldn't be forced on people, right? So these are three reasons why I don't agree completely with the issue, okay? However, I could say that public activities are still useful, right, for some students. So I would have a kind of what I call the counter-argument position there. And I would say that for students who are willing to do this, you could give that as an extra credit activity, okay? Or they could choose to substitute other class requirements, okay, with the public service activities, okay? So for other students who are not occupied in other ways, they could choose to do that. As extra credit, okay? So this is my mind map, okay? And then you do this on scratch paper, okay? And then you can start typing, okay? And fill in the details, okay? Or you can use an outline like this, okay? You have that on your handout as well, okay? So this outline will begin with the introduction and 3 paragraphs and then the conclusion, okay? At least you should have 5 paragraphs, okay, for your issue essay, okay? And this is similar to your mind map, okay, that we just drew here, okay? So each of the ideas here represents one paragraph, okay? And the qualifying section here will represent another paragraph, okay? So it's the same thing. Just up to you which way you want to do it, okay? And then you start typing and start adding details to the paragraph, okay? And the last step is to reread, revise, and edit, okay? So be careful about grammar, punctuation, spelling, and non-academic voice, okay? A lot of people like to use informal or spoken language when they write, and that's gonna bring the score down, okay? For example, things that you should avoid are things like well, okay? The filler well, or you know, something like that. That's are characteristics of spoken language. Judgmental terms like so stupid, right? Or hedges like I think, okay? That would kind of weaken your position a bit, okay? And addressing the reader with you, like you should know and so on, okay? So you should make it formal. Question?
For terminology that may be not universally known, like things like think outside the box, or can we use those?
You can, but if you're not sure that that's universally known, as you said, you might want to define your terms in the essay, okay? You can say, by thinking outside the box, I mean, or something like that, okay? So the more clarified it is, the better for you, okay? So good question, okay? So let me show you the finished essay for that last topic that we just looked at, okay? You have this on your handout, okay? Okay, so to use the same example, okay? This is the first paragraph, okay? And in the first paragraph, what you do is you start, okay? You start with the restatement of the topic, okay? So here I start with, some colleges are implementing a new requirement demanding students to engage in public service activities, hoping that with that experience, the students would receive a balanced, well-rounded education. Okay, this is a separate handout, okay, that you should have. So here you start with a restatement of the topic to show that you understand what's going on, okay, in the issue. So you start off with that, okay? And then the next thing that you will have is your claim. So this is the restatement. So I'll put it here, restatement of the issue, okay? You start off with that, so you kind of reword the question, okay? To show your understanding of the issue, to show your analytical and critical eye. And then what comes next is your explicit thesis. Okay? It has to be explicit, okay, and it will come second to that restatement. So you will say, in this case, I'm not against such a goodwill, but I will point out that without some conditions, this new requirement may prove detrimental rather than beneficial. Okay? So that's my qualifying statement. Okay? So it has to be explicit. Okay? So you are done with that first paragraph, which is the intro paragraph. Then you move on to the first reason, right? This is the reason that you have on the mind map or the outline already. Okay? So the first sentence or so, the first sentence or the first two sentences would be the issue that you have against that position, right? So this is reason one. Okay? Reason one is because some students are already working as full-time employees, okay, either on and off campus, that would be requiring public activities would be too burdensome for them. Okay, so that's your first reason, right? So you will have that as the first statement, okay, your reason, okay? And then what follows is gonna be your evidence, okay? So this would be your evidence and examples. Okay? You can use your personal experience. You can use something that you have already read. You can use something that you imagine. Okay? But make sure that it's relevant to what you are doing here, what you are discussing here. Okay? So it should be like that. Now, that's the second paragraph, right? The third paragraph, let's see. The third paragraph will be the same thing, okay? Will be the second reason, okay? So this is the second reason. And you follow that up with more examples and evidence in relation to the second reason, okay? Notice that you want to make everything connected, every paragraph connected, so you want to use transition words like in addition here, okay? To show that this paragraph is connected to the previous paragraph, okay? So you do that with the third one. Now, you come to the fourth paragraph, right? And this is where you will indicate the qualifying issue, right? So you start with the transition word, however. Do you see that? To indicate that it's contrastive, okay? It's a contrastive idea, okay? And again, you will have the third point here, the third reason or the third point. And what follows is going to be evidence again, in the form of examples, personal examples, or something that you have already read. Okay? And finally, you come to the last paragraph, okay? And in this last paragraph, you will summarize all the reasons that you have talked about so far. Okay, so this is the summary. Okay, and perhaps you should give some solution to the issue, okay, which is a way to end the essay on a strong note. Okay, in this case, the way that I end it with a strong note is to say that instead, the issue should be who would be required to engage in public activities rather than required of all students, okay? And if a choice should be given to those students who are not willing to perform the service, okay? So this is just another way to look at the issue, okay? So give some kind of solution to the issue and also to summarize all the points that you have made. Okay, so this is easy, as you can see. So what's, let's see, let me close the ink here. So from here, in the whole, from the whole essay here, okay, what you can see is that first you'll start with the intro paragraph in which you restate the issue and then followed it up with the thesis statement, right? And then 3 paragraphs stating different reasons, okay, for or against the issue, right? And then with a concluding paragraph, okay? So that form, okay, could be used for all the issue essays that you will see on the GRE test, okay? So any questions? And here, I give you a useful template for you to use, okay? And you can construct this template at home, okay, before you go into the test room, okay, and practice using the template, okay? And you have this on your handout as well, okay? So in paragraph 1, paraphrase the issue, restate the issue, and then if you want to qualify, okay, the issue, have that word, okay, use that word, however, okay, and then with your claim, followed it up with your claim. And then 3 or 4 paragraphs stating your different reasons, okay, sorry for that, stating your reasons, using your personal experience, news, historical events, or a statistic, or whatever you want to use, okay? And they should be similar, okay, as supporting paragraphs. And then you can come to the conclusion, restate your position, and the reason why you want to reposition the issue, okay? So that should be the template that you use, okay? It's like the backbone of your paper, okay? No matter which topic you are given, you can use this template, okay? So it's a useful template to have, okay? So what's going to be different is the examples that you use and the reason that you use, right? But the template is going to be the same, okay? So to summarize, things to remember for you, your essay must have 5 paragraphs at least, or 6, okay, if you have more than 3 reasons. Intro, the body, at least 3 paragraphs of supporting ideas, and if applicable, a qualifying section, okay, and a conclusion, okay. And in the introduction, there must be an explicit thesis that states your position, okay. And your body paragraph must provide supporting ideas for your position, okay, in the thesis, okay. Don't just assert that something is the case, rather justify your position, okay, using examples, using statistics, whatever you know, okay. And the issue is going to be an issue of general interest, so it shouldn't require you to use your biology knowledge or anything like that, okay. So everyone should have a lot to say on a particular issue based on your experience, okay. So if we have time, we'll come back and practice that, okay. So let's move on to the next section on the analytical writing section, which is the argument essay, okay. And for this section, you'll be given 30 minutes, okay, just as you are given 30 minutes for the issue essay, okay. For this section, okay, this section aims to test your critical and analytical skills, okay. It asks you to write a critique of an argument presented as a short passage, okay, and you have to consider the logical soundness of that argument, okay. In other words, the author has already drawn a conclusion, okay, and you need to determine whether that conclusion is logical or not, okay. Is there any problem, logical problem with that conclusion, okay? And then after that, you should propose some ways to improve that conclusion, okay? And let me tell you this, that all the statements that you are given will be logically flawed in some way, okay? They won't give you a statement that's perfect, okay? Because they want to test your ability to find faults with the statement. So every statement that you see on the GRE exam will be logically flawed in some way, okay? And this is a place for you to identify, present, and discuss logical flaws, okay? It's not a place to show your agreement or disagreement with the issue, unlike the issue essay, right? So here you're not constructing your argument or your position as to how we should support the government or anything like that. But you will have to find faults, okay, with the author's position, okay? So this is a different task, okay? And to tackle this part, you have to understand 3 things, and I'll walk you through these 3 things, okay? The first thing is the argument structure. The second thing is what we call unstated assumptions. And the third one is common logical fallacies. And when you understand these 3 things, you can do this part, okay? So let's start with the argument structure, okay? Keep in mind that every argument in this world, okay, every argument has 3 parts, okay? You will have, the first part is the thesis or the conclusion. That's the same thing, okay? The thesis or the conclusion are the same thing. And that's the claim or the thesis. And you can test whether a statement is a thesis or a conclusion by putting the word so in front of it, okay? If it fits there, then it's the thesis, okay? Or therefore, okay? And the second part of it, the argument, is the reason, okay? The reason is what the author uses to support the thesis, okay? You will be given these 2 things on your exam, okay? the thesis, and the reason. Okay? But the third thing, which is the unstated assumption, okay, you will have to figure that out. Okay? And what you have to write on the paper, okay, or on the screen is that, okay, just the unstated assumption. The unstated assumption, what it does is it bridges the conclusion and the reason together. Okay? And without this unstated assumption, you cannot get the thesis. Okay? So this is a kind of a diagram showing how these three parts work together. Okay? The reason supports the thesis or the conclusion, and the assumption kind of bridges these two parts together. Okay? So let me show you some real examples. Okay? So suppose you are given this statement, okay, that because the copy machine has broken down and because our employees need to make copies, okay, our company has to buy a new copy machine. Okay? Remember, on the GRE test, you are given the thesis and also the reason, right? You are given two things. You have to find the unstated assumptions. Okay? So to test which statement is the conclusion, you can supply the word so in front of it, right? So you can supply the word so here. So our company has to buy a new copy machine, right? And it works. So that's the thesis. Okay? That's the proposal. And the reason is going to be the other part. Because the copy machine has broken down and because our employee need to make copies, that's the reason. The conclusion or the thesis is our company has to buy a new copy machine. Okay? So the unstated assumptions, okay, are the things that you have to find, right? So here, possible assumptions could be more than one. Okay? So possible assumptions for this statement, for this issue, could be, first, the broken machine cannot be fixed, right? That's why the author concludes that they have to buy a new one, right? That's possible assumption. Second, we cannot borrow it or rent it from someone, right? That's why we have to buy a new one. And the third one could be we have only one machine in our office, right? That's why we have to buy a new one, right? We cannot use something else, right? Some other machines in our office, right? So these are possible assumptions, okay? So you have to figure out the assumptions and you have to attack the assumptions in order to write a well-argued essay, okay? Because these assumptions are going to be problematic, right? What about this one? We have money to buy it. Okay, do you think that that's a good hidden assumption or unstated assumption?
No.
Yes or no? No, why not?
Not because that's not an issue on the first statement. It's not even implied in any way.
Right. So it's irrelevant to the issue, right? The author only states that we have to buy a new copy machine. He or she doesn't make any statement as to where we would get the capital from, right? So that's not an issue. That's irrelevant. So that's not a good unstated assumption for you to make. Okay? So only these three, or if you have more, you have to consider their relevance to the issue presented. Okay? So that's an example of how to find the unstated assumptions. Okay? If we have time, we'll come back to this, okay, to find the assumption. Okay, before we move on, this is not a good thesis for an issue essay. Okay? This is a bad one. Okay, the author makes a questionable recommendation. The suggestion, why appealing in one respect, may actually cause problems, such as increasing risk of gambling, thereby causing people to fall into poverty and so on. So this is more like an argument essay rather than, or more like an issue essay rather than an argument essay, right? So that's not something that you would want to write for the argument essay. Okay. The third thing that you want to know is what I call logical fallacies. Okay? Logical fallacies are simple mistakes, logical mistakes that people always make. Okay? And by knowing some of these, okay, you'll be able to detect the logical fallacies in the issue. Okay? First one is causal fallacy, what I call causal fallacy, in which the author confuses the cause and the effect of an issue, right? For example, when it rains, the road is wet, right? Since today the road is wet, it means that it must have rained, okay? Here, the fallacy is that because we see that it's wet, it must have rained. It could be wet based on other reasons, right? Like somebody poured the water into the road and so on, right? So it might not necessarily be the rain that causes the road to be wet, right? So this is a causal fallacy, okay? And this is kind of what I call the template for you to use, okay, on the exam, okay? If you see that there is a causal fallacy in the statement, you can use this template to help you, okay? I pre-construct that at home, right? And I kind of not memorize, but I know what to write about when I see the causal fallacy. You can have that statement on the exam, okay? So for example, I can say that the argument relies upon the assumption that blah, blah, blah causes something, but there is no evidence to prove that causality and so on. So you can have that, okay, memorize, or you can get yourself familiar with that before the exam, okay? So that's one type of logical fallacy. The second one is false analogy. Two things are similar in one aspect, but may not share other aspects, right? And you will see this a lot on the GRE test, okay? They might try to compare two cities, okay, or two states, okay, and they will conclude that since city A did something, we should follow suit, okay, and that assumes that two cities are similar, okay, in every way, which is not the case. Okay, so you'll find that a lot, and this is a kind of a pre-made template for you to use. Okay, so you can at home you can get yourself familiar with that, okay, and prepare yourself for the exam. Okay, and there are other fallacies. Limited choice fallacy, take it or leave it, which means you have only two choices available. Okay, which in reality is not the case, right? You may have more choices to choose from, right? Just like in the example that we just used, we have to buy the machine, okay? Buy or not buy it. We could rent it, right? We could borrow it from someone else. That could be an option too, right? So that's one fallacy that you might want to consider. And this one, the next one, the number fallacy, is another one that you'll find a lot on the GRE test, okay? So basically, a person uses a number, okay, to justify the conclusion that he or she makes, okay? For example, the Body Combat Club claims that the university should support more funding because its membership has increased by 100% recently, okay? And the number that they use is the 100% increase in the membership, right? Which might not be the reason as to why more funding should be given to the club, right? Other reasons or other factors should be given also in order to get more funding, right? Survey statistic fallacy is another one that's interesting, okay? Typically, the GRE test will present you with some statement about a poll that some people collect, okay? They'll use that as a reason to support the conclusion, okay? But you will have to attack that fallacy, okay? Saying that you don't know, okay? Saying that you don't know who conducted the poll, for example, and you don't know whether the group or the population would be representative, okay, to make that conclusion, okay? Because they won't give you any details about that on the GRE, so you have to attack these points, okay? Always the same fallacy, Okay, what happened in the past would be taken as the same for the future. Okay, and you can attack that fallacy as well. Okay, against the man fallacy, this one would attack a personal characteristic of a person and says that that person is not suited for the job. Okay, but that personal characteristic might not have anything to do with the job. Okay, so for example, Bill Clinton is a bad president because he's unfaithful to his wife. Okay, so the thing that you have to attack is being faithful or not faithful to his wife might not be related, might not be relevant to his quality as a president. Okay. Straw man fallacy. This last one is to take an issue to an extreme. Okay, just like a straw man, right? Those who favor gun control legislation just want to take all guns away from responsible citizens and put them in the hands of the criminal. Okay, that is to one extreme. Okay, people who favor gun control legislation might not have that end, might not have that extreme end as the goal, right? So you can attack that as well. Okay, so these are 9 common fallacies that you will see on the GRE test. Okay, just get yourself familiar with these fallacies so that when you are presented with an issue, you can recognize the fallacy readily. Okay, and also you can use the pre-made template that I have here as something that you would have on the essay as well. Okay, question? Do you want to press that?
What is the difference between the strawman fallacy and the limited choice fallacy?
For the limited choice fallacy, you have only 2 choices available to choose from. Either you are against us or you are with us, right? But in reality, you have more than these 2 choices, right? But the straw man fallacy is that to present a slippery slope in the sense that the author is trying to push the issue to an extreme, which might make it more dangerous than it usually is. Okay. All right. So we have already talked about 3 things, right? The argument structure, that's the first thing, and then how to find the unstated assumptions, right? Unstated assumptions have to be relevant to the issue, right? And the last thing is logical fallacies. Okay. So next step is how to put these on the actual essay, right? Again, I have these 5 or 6 steps, okay? And they are pretty much similar to the steps that we already did for the issue essay, okay? The first thing is you have to understand the topic. You spend 1 or 2 minutes there. And then dissect the argument in search of the assumptions. You can use about 5 minutes there, okay? And then gather points by a mind map again, 2 minutes. Add the details as you type, okay? 1 minute and start typing and doing the revising and the editing work would be 5 minutes, okay? So let me show you the structure of the essay here, okay? So again, you will have 3 major parts: the intro, the body, and the conclusion. Okay, same as the issue essay. Okay, exactly the same thing. Okay, and what you have inside each paragraph is pretty much the same as well. Okay, so for example, in the intro, you should summarize the conclusion and the supporting idea. Just restate the issue so as to show that you understand. Okay, what's being presented, what is being proposed. Okay. And then present your thesis statement, okay? It's logically flawed, right? That should be the same for all argument essay, right? Because as I said, all the statements that are given to you will be logically flawed in some ways, right? So you will have to say that it's logically flawed, okay? And then why it's flawed, briefly, okay? And then 3 or 4 body paragraphs, each one attacking an assumption or a fallacy. Okay, and finally, you can have the conclusion paragraph in which you summarize and then give a solution to make the argument stronger or better. Okay, so let me show you one example, one real example. This is a topic given by the GRE. Okay, And there's a city called Monroe, okay, that's the city, and a jazz music club, okay, proposes that actually this statement is written as part of the application for a small business loan by a group of developers in the town Monroe. Okay, and they propose that the bank should give them a loan to establish a club, a jazz club. Okay, the reasons being, first, the nearest jazz club is 65 miles away from Monroe. Okay, so it's far away. Okay, so we would be good. Okay, we would be in a good position to establish a jazz club there in Monroe. Okay, and another reason, you can see the signal word here, plus. Last year, over 100,000 people attended the jazz festival in Monroe. Okay, so the author thinks that, well, that's a good evidence, a good piece of evidence to show that a loan should be given. Okay, and in Monroe, there are a lot of jazz radio programs, right? And people like it. Okay. And there's a statistic here given to you. A nationwide study, right, shows that a jazz fan spends about $1,000 per year on jazz products. So that's why to establish a jazz club in Monroe would be a good idea. Okay, so that's all the reasons. Do you think that all the reasons here are logically flawed in some ways? Again, when you're given a statement like this, you have to suspect that it's logically flawed, right? On the GRE, of course, for the purposes of the GRE. Do you think that there are some problems with the reasons? What could be some problems? Remember the fallacies that we just talked about?
The people that attended the jazz festival might have not been from Monroe.
Right. So the sampling group, right, might not be representative of the people in Monroe, right? So there could be people from somewhere else, right? And that wouldn't support the argument that people in Monroe will buy the services of the club, right? Anything else? So that's a good one. Anything else? So there are like about 3 reasons, right, that the author gives to support his position, right? The jazz club is 60 miles away. The 100,000 people attending the jazz festival last year, and also radio programs, and the nationwide study, like that shows that people spend about $1,000 per year. Okay, so you have to attack these 3 or 4 reasons. So that's one already. Anything else?
And there's no guarantee that they'd spend $1,000 a year at a jazz club in Monroe.
Right, right. So people who spend $1,000 on jazz products elsewhere might not do the same, right? Might not have the same buying behavior in Monroe too, right? So that would be another one to attack. Anything else?
You can assume that the well-known jazz musicians would be interested in your club.
I'm sorry?
Because it says several well-known jazz musicians live in Monroe.
Okay. So the problem is?
That those jazz musicians would maybe not use their club.
Right, right. That could be another one. Anything else?
Or that the
Then they have a contract with someone else.
I'm sorry?
Then they have a contract with someone else elsewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going really.
Right, right, right.
Folks, be sure to press the button when you speak.
What about the high-rated radios programs? One real example. This is a topic given by the GRE, okay? And there's a city called Monroe, okay, that the city, and a jazz music club, okay, proposes that actually this statement is written as part of the application for a small business loan by a group of developers in the town Monroe. Okay, and they propose that the bank should give them a loan to establish a club, a jazz club. Okay, the reasons being, first, the nearest jazz club is 65 miles away from Monroe. Okay, so it's far away. Okay, so we would be good. Okay, we would be in a good position to establish a jazz club there in Monroe. Okay, and another reason, you can see the signal word here, plus. Last year, over 100,000 people attended the jazz festival in Monroe. Okay, so the author thinks that, well, that's a good evidence, a good piece of evidence to show that a loan should be given. Okay, and in Monroe, there are a lot of jazz radio programs, right? And people like it. Okay. And there's a statistic here given to you. A nationwide study, right, shows that a jazz fan spends about $1,000 per year on jazz products. So that's why to establish a jazz club in Monroe would be a good idea. Okay, so that's all the reasons. Do you think that all the reasons here are logically flawed in some ways? Again, when you are given a statement like this, you have to suspect that it's logically flawed, right? On the GRE, of course, for the purposes of the GRE. Do you think that there are some problems with the reasons? What could be some problems? Remember the fallacies that we just talked about?
The people that attended the jazz festival might have not been from Monroe.
Right. So the sampling group, right, might not be representative of the people in Monroe, right? So there could be people from somewhere else, right? And that wouldn't support the argument that people in Monroe will buy the services of the club, right? Anything else? So that's a good one. Anything else? So there are like about 3 reasons, right, that the author gives to support his position, right? The jazz club is 60 miles away. The 100,000 people attending the jazz festival last year, and also radio programs, and the nationwide study, like that shows that people spend about $1,000 per year. Okay, so you have to attack these 3 or 4 reasons. So that's one already. Anything else?
And there's no guarantee that they'd spend $1,000 a year at a jazz club in Monroe.
Right, right. So people who spend $1,000 on jazz products elsewhere might not do the same, right? Might not have the same buying behavior in Monroe too, right? So that would be another one to attack. Anything else?
You can assume that the well-known jazz musicians would be interested in your club.
I'm sorry?
Because it says several well-known jazz musicians live in Monroe.
Okay. So the problem is?
That those jazz musicians would maybe not use their club.
Right, right. That could be another one. Anything else?
Or that
Then they have a contract with someone else.
I'm sorry?
Then they have a contract with someone else elsewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going really.
Right, right, right.
Folks, be sure to press the button. When you speak.
What about the high-rated radios programs? The fact that radio programs are popular in Monroe wouldn't be a convincing piece of evidence to support that the club would be successful too, right? So that would be another thing that you can attack. Okay. So these are some things that you can attack, and you can just choose 3 or 4, okay, on the exam. Okay, so for example, the number fallacy, right? 100,000 people. Who are these people? Are they representative of the people in Monroe, right? Are they jazz fans? Are they seasonal fans or regular fans, and so on? Okay. Quality of the data fallacy. The highest rated radio evidence does not necessarily predict that the club would be successful, right? The number fallacy, the national 1,000 a year expense on jazz doesn't necessarily apply to Monroe, right? Okay. Yeah.
Well,
Did you press the button?
yes. It seems that some of them, I mean, I guess I'm trying to find what would be considered good enough of a reason, because nothing is 100%. But for me, like number 5 seems reasonable, because the only club close to these people is 65 miles away. So if you think about it, people would attend. People that live in Monroe, it's like the only club that they can actually go to, and they don't have to drive 65 miles. Or am I misunderstanding this?
Right. That's correct. But when a bank decides whether to grant a loan, right, they do that decision based on whether or not that business will be successful, right? But the fact that people will attend that business would not be a good convincing piece of evidence for that business to be successful, right? That could be like during the initial period of the business, right? People might attend that jazz club during the initial period, but then later on it might not prosper. That could be one thing, and you could say that in the actual paper, in the actual essay as well, right? So you can explain this, elaborate on this, and filling in the details there. Okay.
That statement doesn't give you numbers as to how many people from Monroe are actually attending, going to that particular club.
And then
So-
that would follow from other fallacies that you have already described or explained above as well, right? That you don't know how many jazz fans there are in Monroe, okay? So that's why this might be a good thing to attack as well, okay? And you can explain that details, whatever you think. The more elaborated reason you have on this, the better, okay?
Just because you listen to jazz, it doesn't mean you will attend a jazz club.
Right, so that's another reason.
I guess it doesn't matter if it's 60. I guess it's irrelevant that it's 65 miles away, because it wouldn't work either way.
Right, and you can put that, you should put that in the essay as well, okay, the explanation of that, okay? So as for the finished essay, okay, you can see that on the other side of the handout, okay, this is a single piece handout, and I could show it on the screen as well, which is here, okay? So there are 2 pages, okay? Again, the structure is going to be the same, okay, as the issue essay, okay? Here you will start with the intro paragraph, right? And you will start with a restatement of the argument of the author, okay? Restatement of the argument to show that you understand the issue and you can restate it in your own words. So that's good, okay? Because it will establish you as a critical reader, okay? You know what's going on, you know what's being proposed. And then your claim, your thesis. And your thesis should be the same, right? In that you will say that it's logically flawed, okay? While the argument seems convincing on first glance, there are significant and underlying flaws that raise doubt about the author's conclusion. You can use that as your thesis for all the argument essays, okay? So you can memorize that, okay? Or you can use a different version that says about the same thing, okay? And then paragraph 2 will be, again, the first weakness, the first logical weakness. okay? And then you will explain, you will elaborate on that weakness, right? Using examples, using explanations as to why you don't think that that's a strong logical piece of evidence, okay? And you do that with, let's see, you do that with all the paragraphs here, and you should have about 3 or 4. You should have about 3 or 4 logical weaknesses, okay? And those are the unstated assumptions that you need to attack. And you will start with why is weak, okay, and then the reason, okay? Finally, you will come to a conclusion. Here is the concluding paragraph. In the conclusion, you need to summarize. This is the same for the issue essay as well. You need to summarize all the weaknesses. You need to summarize all the weaknesses. And then, ideally, okay, this is important, you need to give some suggestions as to how the argument could be stronger, okay? For example, in this one, therefore, if the author were to provide greater evidence regarding the jazz festival, the radio listeners, and the relevance of the national survey, and the similarity between this club and the competitor, his argument would be more convincing, okay? So these are the suggestions that you make, okay? And the suggestions stem from all the logical weaknesses that you have already identified, okay? You can say that if more evidence could be given on this and this, right? And if for example, if the survey discloses who conduct the surveys and who were the participants, you could do that, okay? So again, don't forget to have the suggestions at the end, okay? So this will show that you have the critical skills, okay, on the GRE exam. Any questions about the argument essay? So to summarize here, for both parts of the analytical writing section, okay, you have to write 2 types of essays, right? The first thing is the issue essay, and the second thing is the argument essay. And the tests are different, okay? But what's the same is the structure of the essay, right? You have to have the intro where you restate the issue, right? And then you have to have the thesis, okay? And then 3 or 4 reasons, okay? With examples and with explanations. And then you have a conclusion which restates all the points that you have already made, and then provide some suggestions as to how you would make it better, okay? So since we are tight on time here, let's proceed to the reading section, okay? The reading section here is part of the verbal section, okay? And for the reading section, you will have about 10 passages or so, okay? But the good thing is that you will have only 1 paragraph passage, or at most you will have 2 paragraphs passage, okay? So that's good. It's not as long as it used to be, okay? In the old format, you might have like 5 paragraphs passages, okay? So, but here it's good that you have only 1 or 2 at most, okay? And you'll have 10 passages, okay? And you'll be asked about 2 to 4 questions based on each passage, okay? And the questions will test your ability to assess the author's purpose and meaning. That is the main idea. So you have to be able to catch the main idea of the passage, okay? And it will test you the ability to make inferences that can be drawn from the passages, okay? And finally, the ability to locate the specific information. This is something that has just been added to the new format. Okay? So I will talk about the question, these questions in order. Okay? You will have about 3 types of questions on the reading comprehension part. Okay? The first type is that you will have to select the best answer choice from 5 choices given. Okay? And it's usually going to be about the main idea or what's implied by the passage or what's incorrect or correct about the passage. Okay? And this includes a function question. Okay? I'll talk about a function question later on. An example is the bolded sentence in the passage functions to. That's the function question. Okay? And then you'll be given a bolded statement, okay, from the passage, okay, and you have to answer, choose the answer that best represents the function of that bolded passage. Is it the thesis statement, or is it the conclusion, or is it doing the supporting evidence for the passage? Okay, so you have to choose the best answer choice from all of the 5. So that's one type of question. The second type of question is you have to select all that apply, meaning you will be given 3 answer choices, and you have to choose answers that are correct, okay, which could be more than 1. Okay, and no partial credit will be given to partial answer that you choose. So for example, which of the following is or are correct according to the passage? X is Y, Y follows Z, Z causes A. So if this and this are correct, you have to choose both. Okay? If you choose only one, you will get no credit for it. And if you choose the wrong answer, then of course you're not given any credit for it, right? So you have to choose all that apply. Okay? So if all of them are correct, you have to choose all of them, all 3. Okay? If you think that the first and the second are correct, you have to choose that both. Okay? So in this kind of question, you have to consider each choice separately. Okay? Meaning this first choice has nothing to do with the second choice, and the second choice has nothing to do with the third choice. You have to consider each choice separately. Okay? And the third type of question is for you to locate a specific sentence in the passage. Okay? So you have to use the mouse to click on the statement, on the proper statement that that corresponds to the question. Okay? For example, you'll be asked to select the sentence in the passage where the author states that A is B. So you have to use your mouse to click on the sentence that means A is B, for example. Okay? For some tips, as for some tips that I could give you, for this one, you have to speed read and take very short notes using a mind map or do it on scratch paper. Okay? And the first 2 sentences are absolutely important, okay, because they contain a thesis or the claim of that passage. Okay? And so are the last 2 sentences, as they are conclusion. Okay? So if you run out of time, just look at the first 2 sentences so that you know what's it about, and also the last 2 sentences. Okay? And use your notes to find the right paragraph where the right information is, and never memorize anything, okay, because you are not tested on memorization here, and you can always go back to the passage. So that's why there's no need to memorize things. Okay? Use your scratch paper. Okay? And try making a prediction on the right answer before you see before you look at the answer choices. Okay? And that will help guide you whether you look for the right answer. Okay? And try eliminating wrong choices, and beware of trick choices. And we'll talk about trick choices and wrong choices in a minute here. Okay? And when you look at the question stems, you have to look at the keywords. Okay? For example, the word state means that the information is clearly given. The word suggest means that it's not explicitly stated. Okay? So you have to look at the question stem. Okay? And passages will have keywords like however, nevertheless, in addition, and so on. So those are the keywords that you need to take a note of. And then, for example, however means that it's it's going to be contradictory, right? So note those keywords, okay? Finally, for the function questions, you'll be given the bolded statement in the passage, right? You have to consider these statements in relation to the whole passage because it will ask you what the function of that bold statement is. So you have to consider that in relation to other sentences in the passage in order to know the function of that, okay? And don't just focus on the bolded part, okay? Wrong choices to be eliminated. Answers that contradict your notes or understanding, that would go first. Answers phrased with absolute wording, that's something that's suspicious and you should get rid of it. For example, absolute meaning implies words like always, no one, ever, never. Okay, so all those are things that you can find exceptions to easily. Answers that are taken from a wrong paragraph, and you can get this from, of course, your note, right? And answers that look like it's quoted from the passage or cited directly, okay? So people will choose this as their answer, okay? Because they think that, well, that looks the same as what's in the passage, right? But that's usually a trick choice, okay? And the right answers are usually paraphrase statements, okay? Rather than just direct quotes from the passage, okay? So you should suspect that when you see a kind of a very similar looking choice, okay? So let's practice questions. I have just 2 passages here, okay? And this is the first passage, okay? I asked you to circle the best choice that gives you the main idea of this passage, okay? Which of these choices best represents the main idea of the passage here? You have that on your handout as well, okay? Just one. So from A to E, this is choosing the best answer from the 5 answers choices given, right? You have that on your handout as well. It's going to be on page, let's see. It's going to be on the last page on page 8. I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay, most of you are finished. So which of these choices would have to go first, do you think? Which choices you could eliminate first? A, you could eliminate that, right? Because there's no cause and effect relationship between the first one and the second one, right? The paragraph here didn't state that Rome defeated its opponent because it could move quickly, right? Those are 2 separate things that make Rome a powerful empire, right? So that could go first. And another one that could go first is number D. There is the absolute language here that you can see. Let's see, let me circle that. Was always better, right? The paragraph didn't say anything about being always better, right? So that will have to go. So we have B, C, and E left. Okay? So what's the answer? We have someone say B, some people say C. We don't choose E, right? I didn't hear anyone say E. So we don't choose E, right? Because there's nothing about, let's see, there's nothing cause and effect about building the transport system and was able to build a big empire, right? So, so we have B and C. Which one is better?
C. B.
I would say number C is better. Okay? Number B is good. Nothing's wrong with it. But one point that I could make is that the cause and effect is not captured in B. Okay? But that cause and effect is captured completely in C. Okay? So basically here what the paragraph states is that Rome could could maintain a large empire because it has a good transportation system, right? And its army was efficient as well. So two things. And they could move quickly from place to place. So number C is correct. Okay? Let's see. So let's move on to the next one. Okay? Here I have two questions based on this passage. Okay? I'll give you about 2 minutes, okay, to do two questions. You see the bold statement, right? And the question asks you about the function of that bold statement. Okay, that's the first question. So what's the function of that bolded statement? Develop an argument, conclusion of an argument, evidence supporting a conclusion, evidence supporting an objection or thesis. So which one would you choose? So which one could you eliminate first?
C and D.
You can eliminate C. Okay, you can eliminate D. It's not the conclusion. So what else do you have? Develop an argument and then the thesis.
So it is a thesis, but it prompts you to develop an argument.
So I would choose, in this case, number E, a thesis. The thing is, a thesis will have to be an explicit statement, okay? And anything could develop an argument, okay? This one could be an argument as well. Different standards of media coverage account for this erroneous belief. That could be the function. The function could be to develop an argument as well. So, but this one, it's best to choose that it's the thesis sentence, okay? Because without that, you can try cutting it out. And then without that, the paragraph here wouldn't have a unified kind of a statement that would cover all the arguments being made here, okay? So you would choose it as a thesis, okay? So, and following from that, what's the best statement that represents the author's main idea in this paragraph? Oops. Let me turn this off. Sorry, I need to turn this off. Okay. A, B, C, D, or E. Just choose one that's the best. Sometimes you might see two equally good ones, but that will always be the best one. Okay? GRE is about choosing the best answer. Okay, which one did you choose? Number B is the best answer, okay? Number A is not correct because this is beyond what the passage says. You cannot choose anything that goes beyond the passage, okay? And you cannot use your personal knowledge, personal experience, or anything like that when you read. You have to go by the passage, what the passage says. Here, it doesn't say anything. The passage didn't say anything about it being relatively minor. So you can cut that out, take that out. Number C, this is the weakness there. Driving is more dangerous than flying because different standards of media have forced airlines to improve the safety standard. That has nothing to do with the passage, so that's out. Number D, many people believe that flying is more dangerous than diving, even though overwhelming evidence points to the opposite conclusion. This is the opposite of what's being presented there. And number E, media coverage is responsible for the belief that flying is more dangerous than driving, even though every year more people are killed. There's nothing that says about every year more people are killed, okay, in the car accidents. Okay, so the best answer would be number B. Okay, so that one is correct.
D again, D is reinstating pretty much what.
Yeah, and then it kind of looks like what's being taken from. It looks like that is being taken from that, right? So that's a suspicious choice that you want to kind of raise your doubt against. And then if you consider that choice D, it is totally the opposite of what's said in the passage. Okay?
Really? How is it opposite?
Yeah,
How is it opposite?
Let's see. Many people believe that flying is more dangerous than driving, even though overwhelming evidence points to the opposite conclusion.
Right.
Is there any conclusion drawn in that passage?
Evidence, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. So that to me is telling me. See, I feel that D is pretty much the same first sentence, just expressed in different order. Many people believe that flying is more dangerous than driving. That's stated, even though overwhelming. It's just a different order. But
Right. Is there any evidence that's being shown in the passage here?
despite overwhelming evidence.
To the contrary.
To the contrary.
Many people think that flying is more dangerous than driving. Is there, what's the conclusion that's being drawn in here? Does the author conclude that flying is dangerous or more dangerous or less dangerous than driving?
Less.
Did he or she draw that conclusion?
I think the author, whoever is writing that, is saying that most people think that flying is more dangerous than driving, but there is evidence that implies the opposite.
I think what it's telling us is that the media is directing people to think.
Right.
And that he's not concluding which one is more dangerous. He's just saying that it's the media. The media is the cause of why people are thinking that way.
Right. So there's no conclusion that's being drawn by the author, right? That's my point, that there's no conclusion that's being drawn whether flying or driving is more dangerous, okay? Because what the media does is only, right, direct people attention to the news, right? But here, some conclusion is being drawn here, right? So, any other questions? Nope. So today we have looked at both sections, the analytical writing section and also the reading comprehension section. I hope that some tips that I have given you today would be useful for you to use on your essay and your reading comprehension part. Okay, and I wish you all the best in your GRE test. Okay, and if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay, and let's see. Any questions? Nope. So I'll see you on campus here sometimes, okay? And best of luck for your GRE test. Thank you.